All done. Well, just like to welcome all of us here into the iMoot. Trust it's all going well. And with us today, we have Mary Rydesky from Anchorage, whom I did have the very great pleasure of meeting many years ago. And we were discussing I need to get back up there. Or Mary, you need to come to Perth. That might be the alternative. But thank you, Mary, for giving up your time today and doing this presentation on Moodle for homeschooling. Over to you.
Thank you, Shane. It's been a delight to catch up with you for a few minutes, and I'm delighted to be able to give this presentation as it's been one of the longest running projects that I'm going to tell you about in case study format. So feel free to interject if you have questions. I will have a Q&A at the end, but feel free, since we're such a small group, to speak up and share your thoughts as well. You're looking at the title screen, and that animal in the upper right is a lynx, which is found in Alaska. I have not seen one that up close and personal, but it is one that we have here and is the logo of one of our clients who has been doing a homeschooling program. So let me kind of talk you through this. I'll skip over the first slide, which is just an abstract of the material that you've seen on the iMoot site. And we'll talk a little bit about the demographics of that coming forward. My hope in going over this story with you is to have you come away with thinking about how Moodle can serve in situations where you have geographic challenges to serve a remote student, and in this case, a situation where you have a remote teacher who is most likely a parent in the homeschooling situation. The case I'll be discussing with you is one that is sponsored by a school district up here, as many of our school districts have a homeschooling or what they call a correspondence course channel, as again, our geographic disbursement makes it very difficult to get a lot of kids within a close enough area to transport them in so that, that they can meet in the school building. And as you think about this, think about and share with us anything that you see that might be a way that you could use your Moodles for an outreach project. So the school district that we're speaking of has this channel that they make accessible both from their school district website and directly from a Moodle site. Their children are dispersed, I don't know over how many miles, but it is extremely distant, and not every kid lives on a highway. In fact, in Alaska, I think we have 9 or 11 named highways, and most of our villages are off the roadway system. So in those cases, the families that need health care fly into one of the cities like Anchorage when they need it. We may have times where they're accessible by water, by waterways, and in the winter by dog sled. So you understand what we're dealing with, and I share that story because so many parts of our world have similar situations. And as a result, I think that most of our school systems up here have developed methods of supporting the parents so that the kids can get an education living where they do. Now, the one I'm speaking of opened a homeschool channel I think about 15 years ago, and I got involved with them approximately 10 years ago. Up before that time, my husband's company had supported them with server space, and they had a Moodle almost from the beginning of the Moodle days. But at the time, it was more a Moodle in name than in use. So as we started to look at what I do as an educator who is technologically inclined, a lot of my career has been in IT as well as in instructional design and in teaching. It was just that wonderful opportunity to work together and make it become a reality. So as we started working with the school district, we had to define what is distance education. We had to put some limits around it. I'm sharing with you on the screen that definition that we used with our school and their school boards so that we could center on the same goal, the aim to deliver education to students who are not physically on site in a traditional educational setting. Now, for many of our villages, we have a high number of Alaska Natives, First Peoples, and so local education is a very understandable concept and one that they embrace. And as a result, the fact that we could bring in information by technology was very well received by the parents. So when we looked at the rationale for supporting the project, it was partially that limited availability of curriculum. Not every parent is schooled himself or herself, and certainly not always on the things that their children are going to be encountering. Think about what we've done with our standards on internet and computer skills that, gosh, everywhere in the world we may have parents who are just becoming familiar with. With a Moodle site, we could provide a variety of courses and integrate those with local knowledge. We could deal with many of the budgetary constraints, because if you only have a few students, you cannot use technology that's going to be highly expensive. We were fortunate in Alaska in that we have government funding which has provided internet connections into our schools and into our clinics. And so that underwrote quite a bit of the networking component of it. But what about the computers? Well, a lot of the villages were able to put end user tools out there, but now how do we teach the teachers and how do we get people who can put classes together? That was the remaining piece. So when we looked at things that they could use, and we looked at resources where they could buy curriculum from elsewhere in the world and in the country, there were a couple of drawbacks. Number one was if we used a program where they would send materials out of state and there were a lot of clients working with that vendor, there was a delay in getting our feedback back. And in fact, they were using one, I believe, out of Florida for several years. As a result, we had dissatisfaction. And that dissatisfaction led our decision makers to think, how can we bring this closer to home? With the goal that anywhere, anytime that a student was ready to learn, whether it was in the off hours for a vendor source or whatever else, we should be able to make it available. So we looked at a variety of modes of delivery. As I said, they had already had a Moodle set up, but they didn't have a technologist and they didn't know how to activate it. They had considered Blackboard and several other tools that were available at the time, which if you've done a comparison, you know that Blackboard is extremely expensive by comparison to Moodle being an open source. Now, the truth is, no matter what you put in, you still need personnel. You need training and you need backup to be able to make it work and function in the way that you'd like it to work. But here we're eliminating cost of seats or licensing. The first go around, these are the main dates that the school district found to be important. In February of 2010, we presented at the Alaska Society for Technology and Education, where there were some good courses on introduction to Moodle, Moodle makeovers. People of all levels and users throughout the state came together for a mini iMoot, or Moodle Moot, prior to the technology event. There were also some dates put in place that as soon as that was over, we would work with teachers for more curriculum development and to plan how we could roll out a truly robust Moodle to support all of their homeschoolers. Cyberlinks, that's the name of the service, the Moodle site, had an in-service or a training for all of its instructors and its admins scheduled for July, so that by August, things could be open and running for all of the students. And from July to December, we continued to develop curriculum, building out the site. In other words, our goal was to have 2 release dates, one for the fall semester, which would begin in August, and again in about December, January for the spring term. The launch, our hope, was to get rolled out in January, and indeed we did do that on a less than robust method, but we had some things out there that they could use. So where did we encounter our difficulties? Well, I call that the bumpy road. And the first thing that was difficult was finding administrative support and getting several people throughout the state who would understand that this is not turn it on, plug it in, that it takes some monitoring and policy setting before we could even engage students or parents or teachers in this environment. Secondly, we had to secure dedicated time for curriculum development and Moodle site development. Excuse me, let me ask if you can hear the equipment noise behind me. Are you all able to hear my voice over that noise? I'm going to continue. I can hear it quite loudly. There's scraping and taking up the street in front of the house, wouldn't you know, at this moment. Anyway, we had to find and get funding for their personnel to learn about curriculum development and how to use the site appropriately. So we had a time resource, a possible travel resource, and a funding resource that we had to secure. We also found that they wanted to teach math courses, and in Moodle 1.0, in its various versions, Moodle was not considered by their staff as math friendly. So we had a great math instructor who was willing to overcome that, and as she said, you had to be creative and have a sense of humor to make that happen. Two other things that were very important. Number one, in our country, looking at copyright and securing those needed and required some personnel from the school district to take care of that so that we knew that we could use materials. There was a course on Alaska history and history of the various cultures of Alaska that had been featured on educational television through public television, PBS, and it was copyrighted. So we wanted to be sure that we were permitted to use that and permitted to use it on a rolling basis for years at a time in order to incorporate that instead of run our own presentations. And of course, the last thing was the learning curve. You cannot learn Moodle in one setting. It's so robust and so much to do that it takes some time, and plan that in if you are looking at bringing something forward. Shane's comment is absolutely true. How we expect teachers and administrators, anyone who's using a resource like this, to just open it up and start it, oh, it's just not fair. Yet, you know, I think about what we're faced with companies like Amazon, who have made such a science of easy to navigate and make their purchases. That's our competition. We need to learn how to create things that are can-do from the get-go and are easy to navigate in order to have the support that we need to make these go forward. Now, we did find there were a number of resources that we secured and set up on like a listserv. We sent them in emails. We gave them to our teachers, our facilitators, and our administrators in many, many different formats. We also talked about these and did some in-service trainings with them. Now, understand, in Alaska, when we're talking about rural Alaska, bandwidth is often a challenge for us. So things like TeacherTube or YouTube, visual resources, are often terribly draggy on our system. We found over time that if we were going to do a training, we would call the school district and suggest that they do the download overnight and have it on board on a local server, if at all possible, before we started the class. And for many occasions, that worked. Our other technique for some of the remote sites was to create a program, burn it onto a DVD or a CD, and actually mail them out to the sites. You do what you need to do to reach your audience. So on this screen, I have two pictures. One in the background, or on the left, is the original home site for the cyberlinks that came out on 1 point and lasted to 1.9. For about 24 months or so, I kept saying, we're going to be leaving 1 point behind. We need to have a time frame. We need to have funding to do a new build and to move you over to 2.0. And you can see in the lower right, here is the same look and feel in 2.0. We chose to do that rather than a total redo because we had so many people who were now familiar and comfortable with the look. But I like to see this slide because it was such a challenge to get the time and the funding to actually move us to the new software. I'm sure you listeners can understand what I'm talking about because we're not the only place that had difficulty convincing administration it was worth the effort to move forward. Well, when I think about that history and I think about where we are today, I posed the question for myself, why has it lasted? Why were we able to move over to 2.0? You see, we have very small numbers of students. When our Moodle was in the old version, we may have had in total over the years 50 students enrolled. Think about it. A family may have 1 or 2 students here, another family may have a couple of students there. And we had to think about the cost. We also had to think about how we could make that argument to bring it forward. And this is where I focus on the value to the students, the parents, the teachers, and of course to the school district. Not only in terms of being able to deliver education at a reasonable fee, but the flexibility that we were able to offer. You see, flexibility is not only on scheduling day and night, it's also that ability for a parent to be able to have a Moodle site, learn a little bit about it, and integrate his or her own materials into that site. And once we had parents doing that, the ability to secure agreements to share content back and forth, that's slowly coming on board for us. The word scalability, you may have heard that quite a bit in the last couple of years. It's choosing a program that is open to growth, that it's not too big or too expensive or too heavy for you to run at whatever stage you are, that can grow. And now we have, I believe, about 100 to 150 students who are in the high school level who are or have been recently engaged in our program. And I believe I've got these numbers documented for you here so you'll understand how this works for them. For yourselves, for looking at using Moodle in the homeschool, think about every single open source management tool before you select them. Think about making a pros and cons sheet. For our purposes, asking our target groups, the administrators, the teachers, the parents, and even the kids, what is it that you want to do? And getting kind of that blue sky image. That was our first step. And then when we looked at pros and cons, how useful would it be? How expensive would it be? How long would it take to put a certain resource or tool in their hands? The school district found it important and asked me to include the second one. This is not to build business for myself, but the school district said, have a consultant who has both teaching and technical skill, who can assist with the hosting and the dealing with IT people, who understands the development and the needs of the school requirements in your state or region, and who has done this long enough that he or she can troubleshoot, whether it's a teacher who can't quite figure out how can we put this together, whether it's a parent who is uncertain, am I able to upload for my son or daughter, or whether it's a student who would like to do a project online and maybe do some video and has never done it before. Is there a help desk behind all of this? We build in sufficient time to put in enough programming that when your parents log in for the first time, there's something there for them. When I started the first project, I put up about 11 classes, and some of those came through Moodle hubs, where I was able to share and borrow material from elsewhere in the world, customize it a bit to the Alaska situation, and give parents a starting point from which they could develop. Our contacts within the school district, there were 2, loved Moodle and built classes, as I mentioned, on history and culture and on math. We also built vocational services and a physical education class that would meet the requirements set by the state of Alaska. How we did this was to create one course in each of those and then make 4 levels so that there was a 9th grade level, a 10th grade, an 11th grade, and a 12th grade. And each year the student would return, complete the new requirements pertaining to their advancing level of skill. And as a result, if we had one course with 4 years to it, now we had 4 courses in place. In terms of your technology, do a good needs assessment and determine if you are in areas with low bandwidth or low connectivity, or an area where you do not have a technician. How will you handle it if a parent has a kid whose computer is older or gives up on them? How do we help that student and that parent meet the deadlines in a semester and not let the technology get in the way? And in this regard, our school districts have been very successful in handling that piece for us. That does not come out to the consultant side, but we do make some agreements with the folks who are facilitating the session at the school district if we know that there is going to be a delay and the parents are not going to be, or the students aren't going to be stressed about it. Yes, I do agree with that, Shane, that when you think about what resources you're using, some of them don't take much space or time to communicate, and others do. Now, having said that, I feel that it's very valuable to have a couple of blocks in your Moodle for seeing who's online, for messaging if it's important to have immediate help from a help desk, and even a live chat a certain number of hours per semester when you are getting the parents oriented to the system. But to finish out this visual, copyrights, we've talked about that before. Copyrights and funding will always be in your mind. And if you think ahead about 2 semesters, so like right now we're in the summer, I'm thinking about funding for the fall term and the spring term. Very soon I'll be looking at the following term and have a rolling calendar to see what are we going to need, what are the updates, and how are we going to do that? Do we have the money to make that possible so that our parents will see new things when they come back in? So to finish the history on that, Moodle 1.0, we ran it concurrent with the 2.0 for about 4 weeks. We had planned to run that longer. Our facilitators finally said, forget it, shut it down. And we did that in a matter of weeks rather than months, which I was great with that. As you may find, if you have old material, it can port over fairly well in a variety of steps, but your quizzes could be a problem. As a result, our facilitators with the school district said, you know, our content is getting a little old anyway. Let's just build from scratch. We'll keep the old Moodle up to refer to it, but this will require our developers to double check everything and make certain that we are very current. And so we turned what could have been an unhappy situation into a very positive one, getting people to, you know, have new material up there. As a result, since that time, and since those early presentations, we have moved forward in 2.0 and completed about almost 2 semesters of our students going through there. Our population has grown. In K-12, there are about 200 students in their schools and 800 in their correspondence program. Now, we don't see all 800. That's K through 12. We have the 9th grade through the 12th grade, and I'm thinking that that is about 100, maybe 150, double, at least double what we had in our first go-through. As you might think, most of our families have multiple children of different ages, and I see this as a type of success. If the mom and pop found that this was valuable to them with an older student, even though it was older technology and we learned as we went along, and are now bringing in the younger students. That is a vote. That is a very good thing. And I think the program will continue. Here's what we heard. Here's where the benefits were. Parents liked a single source portal. They didn't have to go to a multiple of places to get their education and training. They knew they could communicate with the school and the school facilitators in one place as well. Our students got very, very good with navigation in the Moodle. And so having a one-stop shop where they could upload their assignments, know that their assignments had reached the instructor, much better than when they had to send some of them by email to Florida and some of them over here to, to various places. And I haven't heard it said other than verbally, but one student said to me that she liked being able to look back and see where she was in earlier years and how she's added to her documents and skill and understanding in various courses as she's gone from the 9th to the 11th grade, in her case, levels. The teachers also commented that they are saving time in terms of administration. So remember, the parent is the at-home teacher. We have a school district teacher who is evaluating the student's work against the requirements for graduation as set by the state of Alaska and the Department of Education. And those are the teachers that we're talking about who say, we can handle more students because it is organized and we're not checking our email and checking this and that and hoping we haven't lost track of a document. And the administration continues to fund the project. So they must be getting the kind of support from parents that say this is a good thing. Else, we would have more feedback that wouldn't be quite so positive. So that's what I have to present to you today. And my otter here is, I guess I could use that picture instead of my live one, to say, I'm wondering what you're thinking, if you have any comments or questions. Because we are so small, you are welcome to speak these and or type them in, and we could talk for just a minute before we end today. I'm reading Shane's comments. Yes, the parents as the stakeholders, extremely key, extremely. Homeschooling has become so popular in Alaska lately. I've met more and more people who are doing it, and I see the quality of students. It has allowed me to have some side conversations with people who are not in this school district and enabled us as a team to be more responsive to needs because we know what we should be listening for. How many access the Moodle site, parent role, or some other way? We have tried a couple of different methods. I, in 1.0, set up a parent role that was fairly effective with some of them. Others never did get in and get working with it. And I would have to check with my facilitator to see what she has chosen to do now. As I envisioned it, however, there would be a parent role where they could see that their student had uploaded materials and that they were getting grades, just like in our live school districts where mom can go in, dad can go in, and see how their student is doing in terms of overall assessment. Are they attending and are they getting the grades that they should? So far, there is not much collaboration between school districts. We do have a service run by State of Alaska, CISA, that has programming to the schools for distance learning. And I think we have some friends, Shane, who have been firsthand knowledge of that. I worked with them for a little bit and almost went to work for them. It's an intriguing program, but those are merely supporting the schools rather than the home parents at this point. I would envision that if we are able to coordinate between the CISA program and school district programs such as the one I'm describing to you, we could truly bring a variety of education to our students that far exceeds what we have today. But at this point, I cannot tell you that we're doing that well. Very autonomous. Very autonomous. From where I sit as a consultant, I'm in contact with some of them, and I believe Chick is in contact with others, where we either are encouraging them to keep a Moodle or talking to them about a Moodle site as a low-cost alternative to upgrade their services. And sometimes it's a very difficult discussion to have. Doesn't always get us where we want to.
Hi, Mary. I might just ask in the mic because it's easier than typing. I was just thinking, even if they weren't using Moodle, there's probably room for collaboration, just talking about how they do online education, how they deliver and so on. Yeah, I find it funny. It's the same problem we have in Australia too, I think.
Is it?
You talk online, we talk about collaboration, but quite often it just doesn't happen for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, it's probably the one of the greatest struggles I think we find here with teachers is just getting them to talk to other teachers and discuss what they're doing, and you always learn something from other people.
Well, this was the beauty of our Alaska technology, our ASTI meetings once a year, in that we had teachers come in from all over the state and all the school districts, where that sharing became very alive for about a 4-day conference. And as money has gotten tighter, the schools districts are sending in fewer teachers. And if the teachers don't hear about the technology aspects for reaching students at home, we miss one of our biggest stakeholders and our biggest cheerleaders in those communities. So I'm thinking we're at a change point, and I wish I could say that there was money flowing in and that change point would take us to more collaboration, and yet we may be in that dying back stage for a little bit. Sure. Sometimes it has to get to a real pinch point, and then people go, oh my goodness, we could be using technology. Let's see if there's a way for us to collaborate with all of the districts across the state, and one district take the math programs, and one district takes the science programs, and we'll share in one place.
Yeah. You could do like an online iMoot for Alaska.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. In my spare time.
I think I'm more questioned out. Well, let me just take the opportunity just to say, on behalf of the iMoot team, just thank you for giving up your time and describing all that. As I said to you before, there's be a lot of people watching the presentation on the recording, so really appreciate you doing that for us today, Mary, and wishing you all well with what's happening there in Alaska.
Thank you so much, and my appreciation to all who make iMoot possible. I look forward to this every year for that very aspect of collaboration, and I know it's just a marathon to get through, but thank you, and thank the rest of the team.
Will do. Thank you, Mary.
Take care.